Welcome everybody to our follow-up webinar for the recent Explore Day at Tilbury Douglas. My name is Alexia Rhodes. I'm the Learning and Network Manager at the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter. So just before we kick off the webinar, just to let you know that this is going to be recorded and a copy of the recording will be available on our website and our YouTube channel within the next 7 days. So some of you may be aware the Good Employment Charter hosts regular Explore Days, which are small group site visits to another organisation to learn about their employment practices. We recently held an Explore Day at Tilbury Douglas, who are a member of the Good Employment Charter. This webinar is a follow-up to this event and an opportunity for you to hear about the excellent employment practices which were discussed during this event. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to my colleagues from Tilbury Douglas to share some of their exemplary practices. So Emma, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to give you an introduction to the team and then tell you a little bit about Tilbury Douglas before handing over to Emma, who's going to share our engagement and voice best practice. And then that will be followed with Neil, who will do health and wellbeing. And then we can have an open forum at the end for any questions or anybody that's got any other best practice that they want to share. Next slide, please. So today you've obviously got myself. You've also got Darren, who is the project manager at Stepping Hill Hospital, and Ross Woodhouse, who is the assistant site manager. And when we did the Explore Day in person, we actually gave our visitors a site tour, which we won't be able to do that today, but Darren will be giving you a brief overview of the project. We've also got Emma Woodfield, our HR business partner, and Neil Rosiak, our HSE director. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have 138 years experience as a business. Most recently, we were known as Interserve before returning to our heritage as Tilbury Douglas. Next slide, please. We're a leading building, infrastructure, engineering and fit-out company. The top two images are of our flagship projects in the Northwest, Saddleworth School, which we recently handed over, and also the UK's first proton beam therapy centre at the Christie. The other images are of Arrow Park Hospital, Liverpool Heart and Chest, Stepping Hill Hospital and Old Mole Library, but we're also delivering projects at Kingsway Park High School, where I am today, if you can hear construction noise in the background, and Liverpool John Moores University. Next slide, please. So as well as the four key elements we offer as a business, we also provide expertise in MMC, modern methods of construction, net zero carbon, digital construction, and we're committed to social value. Next slide, please. And these are our company's core values, which I hope are reflected in what you'll experience today from this Explore Day. So I'm going to hand over now to Darren, who's going to give you a brief overview of our Stepping Hill Hospital project.
Yeah, so the Stepping Hill project is basically a rework and a brand new emergency and urgent care campus. It's part of a 2-year, £30 million development that the hospital have applied as a tier 1 contractor for. So as part of the first couple of phases, the sort of images you see on this slide is currently a new same-day emergency care extension to the current emergency care centre that's there. The internal sort of photographs are the new internal layouts of basically making an extended area for assessment bays, modular person bays, and also triage bays. We're currently at a phase, we're currently at the sort of like the final fix phases of this now. So we're in the final elements of final fix, so vinyl, ceilings, painting, and putting sort of all the healthcare furniture in. So, which is good. The scheme is a multi-phase, 7-phase scheme that runs over 2 years. Like I say, I'm planning on this side of Christmas handing the first 2 phases over, and then we move on to the next couple of phases. And this sort of scheme will run sort of until Christmas next year. The image on the top right is the main building you see as you drive into Stepping Hill. That's sort of the flagship building. That's going to be the new sort of hyper-acute stroke unit. So that's part of the emergency care campus. So that building will house and facilitate acute stroke services. It will also facilitate resuscitation, rapid service treatment services on the ground floor, and sort of the actual intake for ambulances and main patient transfer into the A&E. The top floor is sort of, it's going to be staff of office areas. The images that you see there are of that area, so it's actually of that main building. So it's actually with very similar stages of that one. We're at the later stages of the fit out, walls, partitions and doors going up, and a couple of images on the right are the new plant rooms that will sort of power and house all the M&E live services for this area. We've currently, at the moment in time, running very well on program and also cost and budget, and also the job itself is growing legs, subject to multiple meetings with the trust team. Things are changing quite often and frequently to suit the needs of the clinical teams, so we do engage quite regularly with these teams and make sure that they get what they're after in regards to, you know, up to date treatment services and areas. I don't think there's anything else really for the scheme I need to talk about, unless there's any other questions.
I can't see any questions for the moment. There is a chat box on the left-hand side of the screen for those attending. If you do have questions, please do put them to our panel. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about employee voice and what it means at Tilbury Douglas and how we measure it and what we do with the kind of feedback that we get. So when we asked our employees in our recent kind of engagement survey, what does employee voice mean to you? These are just some of the example quotes that we got back from the team. So it's asking for people's views and opinions, creating a positive place to work where everyone's listened to, keeping me informed about decisions that directly affect me and letting me have an opinion on those, which is really important. We like to kind of strive for our people to be part of the decisions that we make every step of the way, especially when those are big key decisions that will affect them. So that's really good to see that the perception we have of employee voice almost mirrors that our employees have themselves. So can I have the next slide, please? So why are engagement and voice important? They're not just nice to have, they're really important to the success of every business, and it contributes massively to having those high-performing, happy people in the right places. So giving people a voice will improve your productivity, reduce turnover, enhance morale. If people feel bought into the things that you're bringing in right from the start because they feel that they've contributed, they're always going to be more on board with what you want to do as well. So feeling like they have a say, feeling like part of it was their idea will help them kind of come along on that journey a little bit easier with you. And it will encourage that kind of innovation and creativity as well that businesses need. So, you know, sometimes we can get a little bit stagnant around the table when we've all got kind of perceptions of what we think people want and what we think are good ideas. But it's really important to have that kind of collaboration and input from the wider business as well to kind of understand, well, actually, what is going to work for you and what do you want to see? So if I can have the next slide, please. So how do we listen to them? So we aim to create a culture that's very open and trusting and encourage people to share their honest feedback and ideas that they've got. So ways that they can do that are through our annual engagement survey. We offer starter and leaver surveys as well. So right at the point where you join us, what's kind of your feedback of the onboarding process? How did you find it? Is there anything we could do for other people that might be in your position? Same with leavers, you know, sometimes people will leave for a specific reason. Sometimes they'll just leave because they want to leave, but it's really important that we're getting that feedback from them as well. So, you know, is there something we could have done better that would have made you stay? Is there something, you know, that you thought was really good here that you haven't seen elsewhere? Similar things with managers' briefings and board roadshows. It's really important for us that people hear the ideas from the top, directly from the top. So getting our board together to do roadshows around the country that are taking place actually in the next couple of weeks. So the whole board will go out to various regional locations and give a business update to the people in that area. They'll get feedback from them on what they think is working, what they'd like to see in the future, and it'll all feed into kind of our wider strategy planning and engagement piece that we'll do. So we'll use that feedback to kind of put forward things like benefits reviews ideas or any policy enhancements that we could make. So next slide, please. And this is just a little bit about kind of the stats behind our engagement. So it's all well and good us saying that we do we do all of these great things, but these are just some of the stats that kind of back it up really. So recently in our engagement survey, when we asked our employees if they'd recommend us as a place to work, 88% this year said they would, and 96% said they'd recommend our products and services. So that kind of feeds into getting the employee buy-in as well. So, you know, they've been part of that journey, they've had a voice, they've had a say in what we're doing, and it kind of shows in the reflection of them being able to recommend us and the products and services that we have. So what action have we taken? This is really small on the slide, and I'm not going to kind of read all of it out to you, but like I've said, the feedback that we gather feeds directly into our kind of wider business strategy. So from some of the feedback that we've had, we tend to work on a you said, we did basis. So you said you wanted better communication from the wider leadership team. So we now have bi-monthly wider leadership team meetings and management briefings. So the information that's shared at those meetings is then put with the managers to cascade down through their team, so they're all as well informed as that leadership team would be, so kind of no one feels excluded. More visibility of the board and leadership team. So like I said, we're kind of trying to mandate quarterly site visits from the board members to ensure that our operative workforce as well have that visibility of who they are. So being a construction business, we've got a very large operative workforce that might not be able to access information as in the same way as those in the office would. So they might not have IT kit or mobile phones, etc. So it's being able to make sure that they've got the visibility as well of who's kind of leading the decisions and who they can speak to and who they can share that feedback with. Better access to the resources that I need. So we like to make sure that we've got a good bank of resources to keep our managers self-sufficient. So all of our management resources and guides are all held on our internal intranet, just to empower them to be able to have access to the resource that they need without having to worry about going to a certain team for a copy of a form that they may have done previously. So these are all kind of example actions that we've had off the back of feedback that we've seen. So that was it really. So I can see that a couple of questions have come in. What is the most challenging part of engaging with your workforce? For us, like I've said, it can be that we've got a large operative workforce that don't have access to IT kit and the same methods of communication that we would see across the professional services or like white collar side of the business. So they won't have an email address and they won't have a mobile phone. So where a lot of our communications previously have been via email, that's excluding potentially a large portion of the workforce. So it's making sure when we do send out things like surveys, we consider those that are based on site. So is there an opportunity for us to have a QR code printed on a poster that will give them the link to the survey that they can do on a personal phone? Is there kind of a way we can get a broadcast out to them via, WhatsApp or personal phone number, so that they're not missing out on that message as well? How have you measured the impact of engagement on the wider business benefits? i.e., have you seen an improvement in sickness absence? So I think that means since enhancing kind of company sick pay, have we seen an improvement in sickness absence levels maybe? I'll be honest, I don't think that directly increasing sick pay has led to less absence or more absence. I think it's just important that people know that that is something that's available to them, so they're not kind of afraid to take sickness absence like they would have been before. You haven't got that fear of, oh, I'm going to go off sick, I'm not going to be paid, I'm not going to be able to afford to do what I want to do because I'm going to have to come to work. And so it's that awareness piece of, it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to not come in, and we'll support you wherever we can. How do you engage with diverse workforces? So we have a number of working parties across the business. So we've got a Pride network, we've got a multicultural network, we've got a disability network, we've got a women in construction network. So it's all about awareness. So a lot of diversity is around people seeing people like them in different positions. So how do we encourage those groups to come together and tell us what's important to them, what we can do to increase visibility and inclusion and diversity for those people? Because, you know, it's all well and good, like I've said, us all having opinions on what works best, but it's really important to make sure that those people are involved in the decision-making process as well.
Fantastic. So, Neil, please would you tell us a bit about some of your health and wellbeing practices?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Neil Rojak. I'm the HSE Director for Tilbury Douglas. And I've worked in health and safety for over 25 years. And all my career been in construction, health and safety. And I left the UK probably just about 12 years ago. And when I left, safety was up here and health was a poor cousin sort of down here. When I returned in 2018, it was equal. So there'd been a real shift in the treatment of health and wellbeing on sites and within businesses. And I think that came from something, an initiative that Theresa May started. She asked Lord Stevenson and Paul Farmer, who was then the chief executive of Mind, the mental health charity, to look at health and wellbeing in the workplace. And they put together a paper called Thriving at Work. And if you haven't seen it, make a jot it down. Sort of, it's available to download from the government website. And there are also Thriving at Work booklets that Mind produced that help you to devise a mental health at work plan and help you input and what they should look like. So I think sort of when that started and started to become more available, and sort of everybody has mental health, like everybody has physical health, and sort of the mental health cycle sort of goes up and down. And what we realised in construction people are can be sort of a particular group, male, over 40, working away from home, working long hours. So sort of in the past, sort of having the bacon sandwich sort of every break. The lifestyles can't always be the healthiest. So making health and well-being sort of something positive has been sort of right at the beginning of what we did. So in 2019 we signed up to, it's a national charter called the Building Mental Health Charter, and it was a coalition of all of the construction companies sort of that said that we are going to put this on our agenda. And it allowed us to develop our mental health at work plan and wellbeing strategy. And our mental health at work plan sort of has three main areas: to develop a culture of openness and understanding, put it out there, put it on the table and say sort of, look, this is mental health and this is what we deal with. Building a healthy working environment, so sort of looking at the things that can be stressors and ensure that sort of we've got a handle on them, and then providing support when people put their hands up and say sort of, look, I'm struggling here, sort of, I need some help. And that forms part of our overall wellbeing strategy. And as Emma said, sort of having discussions and having that feedback from sort of our workforce was really good, because sort of one thing that sort of hadn't crept onto the sort of the mental health at work plan in its first edition was something like menopause. And from our Women in Construction group, sort of that got brought up, and it was like, oh yeah, crikey, sort of it was something as simple as that sort of we'd overlooked. So sort of in the second edition, sort of we reviewed that and included it. So how do we develop a culture of openness and understanding? Well, first of all, sort of we do campaigns and awareness. So around November every year, we look at the year coming forward and we say sort of what can we do? And we try and do something every month, something that's interactive and together. Whether that's we had what was called Brew Monday, so sort of a particular Monday in the month, sort of everybody sit down, have a brew, have a chat about health and well-being. Tea and talk days. For World Health Day, we invited occupational health nurses to come into our sites and to do a know your numbers type thing. So we looked at BMI and height and weight and various other indicators, so sort of the glucose levels in your blood, and that was really interesting. Sort of when we did it last year, we found that over 50% of the people who were seen had to go or were advised to go and see their GP because of an underlying health issue. So that's 50% of the people sort of who are working on our site, sort of. And if you extrapolate that to sort of the wider workforce, that's a hell of a number. Sort of whether it's it was cholesterol or blood sugar or whatever it was, sort of. As if you know that there is an issue, you can go and deal with it. We do other things, sort of awareness talks. So sort of we recently had one on suicide awareness, Suicide Awareness Week a couple of weeks ago. We've covered diabetes. We've covered all sorts of topics. And for World Health Day on the 10th of October, sort of all of those who work for Tilbury Douglas, I'm sure will be pleased that we've got a session of desk yoga booked. So sort of have to get your yoga pants on for that day. So it's about engaging, raising awareness. We've invested in training for colleagues, sort of, so for whether it's awareness training, sort of, or it's mental health managers, health and well-being. Introduced a wellbeing app that everybody has access to, and learning and sharing really sort of from sort of what people do out in the general environment. So sort of taking those good ideas and running with them. Next slide, please. So as I said, sort of the wellbeing initiative, sort of one of the things that came out of it was that people had concerns around their levels of activity, and yeah, sort of this was probably in the year after or a couple of years after COVID. People were working from home more. They were sat on their backsides more, sort of. It's only a couple of steps from the kitchen, and not having that activity sort of gave them sort of a more sedentary lifestyle. The other main concern sort of that they had was around nutrition. So it's quite an important topic to understand sort of what people's concerns are, and without being too blunt, it's about getting up and moving about. So frequent advice: improve fitness levels, be more active, and that really is probably some of the best advice. One of my mates who's a GP has said for a long time that the best thing you can do to improve your health is get a dog, because it means you're going out and walking. Yeah, you're keeping active. You're being out in nature more often than not. And I think that if you are in a desk job, and I can see many of us sort of sat behind a desk now, sort of taking that opportunity on a regular basis, why don't you book some time in your diary to do some exercise? I know that the boys and girls on site, Darren, Ross, you may say that sort of you do plenty of walking, plenty of activity sort of already, but it may be just that you park your car further away, or you book the time in and you go for a walk around the block. I know we're coming towards the end of the year. Another month, the clocks go back, and after 5 o'clock, it's not very light. So, can you book that in the middle of the day to actually go for a walk? Can you do some meetings? If you're listening on Teams, can you take your phone with you and put the earplugs in and engage in the meetings? All these things are tools that we have in our armory and allow us to change a little thing, change a little bit of our lifestyle. Next slide, please. So we talked about engagement, and we talked about how we get that information. Emma talked about the surveys, and we talked about sort of how, if we can just move on to the next slide, please. It talked about how we do that engagement. And one of the tools that we have is we have a monthly operational leaders call. So these are our project managers and site managers, the people who are influencing what goes on. And we run various topics. We have an open forum, and it's putting information out there, giving people the tools to actually be able to engage, supporting people who put people to work. So a couple of the initiatives that we have are our Black Hat Academy and our White Hat Academy. Our Black Hat Academy is for supervisors, and that's our supervisors, and it's supervisors from our supply chain who come to work on our projects, to allow them to understand how important that supervisory role is from not only a safety point of view, but a health and well-being point of view as well, because a lot of the activities that we do in construction can cause noise, dust, vibration, and if you're cutting a curbstone or whatever and you're creating a load of dust, not only is it bad for you, it's also bad for everybody around. Sort of that dust contains silica and can cause problems in future life. One of the starkest numbers that I always try and sort of get out there is in industry in the UK, there are around about 150 people who die every year from industrial accidents. That's from construction to agriculture to fishing and farming and in industrial. So that's throughout all industry, 150 people who unfortunately die whilst they're at work. If you look at the number of people who die from occupational diseases, that's over 100,000. And that just puts it into a massive perspective. So these industrial diseases could be mesothelioma from exposure to asbestos, could be COPD from respiratory. And if you look at that 100,000, there's probably sort of millions of others who are out there who have had their health affected by what they do. If it was vibration, maybe vibration white finger, or manual handling, musculoskeletal. I remember talking to a chap who was in his 60s, and he'd worked in construction all his life, and he'd been doing a lot of manual work, and he'd got a bad back. And he said the worst thing about it wasn't sort of that it was impacting him at work, it was impacting him in his home life. He said he couldn't pick up the grandkids, he couldn't swing his golf club. So those things that sort of you think, oh yes, sort of my boss is nagging me, or somebody else is having a discussion with me. It helps generate two-way conversations, sort of, and allows us to see the real impacts of what it is we do. And one of the things that we say to all of our people in our business is that we've got to demonstrate leadership at all levels. Now, as a health and safety wellbeing leader, you'd expect to hear that from me and ensure that people are doing what they should be doing. but I'm only here. I'm not on each one of our 100 sites, and we've got to allow the managers and the supervisors and the co-workers to generate those conversations, demonstrate leadership at all levels, ensure that we've got safety, health, well-being at the forefront of what we do, and when we do it, and to challenge and to step in where we see things that aren't working as well. So I think that sort of for me the important message is that sort of leadership at all levels is something that we have to empower sort of everybody to get involved with and have those conversations about health, safety, and well-being. Thank you.
So I'd just like to open it to the people attending if they'd like to share any other health and wellbeing strategies they use in their organisation. I'll just have a look in the Q&A. And also, if anybody has any additional questions for Neil or the team about the practices which we discussed, please do share them in the Q&A. There are a few comments about annual staff surveys and pulse checks. I think we have covered those already. I don't think there are any other further questions I can see in the chat. So that leads us to the conclusion of this webinar. So I'd just like to thank our speakers for sharing all the great work they're doing with the network. This peer-to-peer learning is invaluable at the Good Employment Charter. We're very grateful for you speaking today and for hosting the session that we held on 7th of September. This webinar and the slides will be available to download on our website within the next 7 days, and those attending will receive a copy of the webinar shortly after this session. So on that note, I would like to conclude this webinar, thank our speakers, and I will hope to see you at a future event from the Good Employment Charter. So thank you very much. Goodbye.